Is it 100%? I don't know what their financial needs are, nor the forecast as of yet. Once you know that, then you can plan for it, which is what the
Are these the only issues that will be looked at over the winter? Just how many fish to catch for cost recovery and how many are left over for property resources? My issue is, all the years I've been on the board, only 3, but every year this has come up. And I'm concerned that the CIA has to rethink its overall management strategy. Go beyond just how many fish for cost recovery. I'm wondering if those kind of larger issues would be part of the purview of the regional planning teams.
Mr. Chairman, Board Member Brown, it's quite possible. It's really up to the association how far they take those discussions. For the most part, the AMP is going to speak to some of the issues that I've laid out as far as numbers, dollars needed, cost recovery, and activities for broodstock throughout this next season. What you're speaking to really is outside of what even the department deals with, and it's an internal function of the P&P.
In our committee, we talked about one of the concerns is where they're going to get broodstock. Apparently they had good broodstock a few years ago, and they've been prohibited by the ninth citric, those guys from collecting those broodstocks. And now the broodstock they've gotten recently haven't been very good, so now they're trying to figure out where to get good broodstock. And I mean, that's kind of fundamental, and they're kind of major issues on how CIA is being run, and whether, I mean, we get rid of the sunset, and they say, okay, next year we've got to catch 100% again, and keep going on the way it's been. I don't know if we've solved anything. And I don't want the hatchery to close down. I just want it to be run in such a way that it survives. I hope that those kind of issues are brought up this winter when we have a new management strategy meeting. Mr. Chair.
Mr. Johnson, thank you. For staff, maybe I'm unclear, but if the board sunsets and does not provide a management plan, then the request for cost recovery will come from the association to the commissioners through the department. It will not come to us, it will come to the department. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct, yes.
And am I correct in assuming the board will be out of the equation at that time? We don't have a management plan, we will not be connected to it, and it'll be between the department and the association.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
And by law, the department, the association, in connection with the department, they have the right to get a broodstock, and they have the right to get some sort of cost recovery according to law. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's my understanding, yes.
And so if this board votes yes on this proposal to sunset it, the board's done with it for the time being. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that would be my understanding.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bluberton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just kind of follow up on earlier discussion by Member Johnstone, and reading through both Alaska Statute 1610-443, which reads, the department shall make every effort within the limits of time and resources to advise and assist applicants or permit holders as appropriate in the planning, construction, or operation of salmon hatcheries. Then looking into regulations at 5 AAC 40.840 regarding annual management plans, basically says that the department will prepare in conjunction with the permit holder an annual management plan to guide and condition hatchery operations. Reading that, I get the impression we're not handing Cook Inlet Aquaculture a free rein to take all the fish, but what we're doing is enabling the department to work with the Aquaculture Association to come up with a plan of management to, in a broad range and broad scope, operate their hatcheries. So hopefully, I think the board has kind of given it its effort to weigh into this equation, put its foot in the water. It's at this point, I think, more appropriate for the department, along with the hatchery, to try and come up with a broader solution to the set of problems that Cook Inlet Aquaculture is facing, try and optimize the performance of that hatchery and get some of those fish into the common property. I think in that regard, for the board to back off, let the Trails Lake management plan sunset and let those entities fall on with their statutory and regulatory duties is the right way to go.
Thank you. Other board members? Mr. Moore?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I agree with both Mr. Clifton and Mr. Johnstone. We obviously spent a lot of time on this in committee, and we discussed all these issues, and came down and helped me make up my mind is the fact that we could either participate or not, and pretty much the same things are going to happen. That Fish and Game is still going to take a lead and make sure that the cost recovery is conducted. One issue you might discuss a little bit, and maybe it was clear to other people, but my understanding is that nothing would be lost in terms of quality or the ability to harvest the fish at any particular point, as it used to be where all the fish had to be taken up at the lake and the weir. Now you would still have the authority to set the terminal control area or fish area. Would you speak to that?
Mr. Chairman, Board Member Morris, that's correct. We would still have the authority to, set a special harvest area, and then for a prosecution of a cost recovery fishery in saltwater compared to a weir cost recovery, which could also take place. So none of that would be precluded.
Thank you. I want to clarify a difference that I see in whether we vote to eliminate the sunset or not. If we eliminate the sunset, they will continue to get 100%, up to 100% of cost recovery before commercial fishery becomes common use for commercial fisheries, right?
That's correct, currently.
But there's still, aren't there other common users participating in this fishery right now?
Mr. Chairman, there are common property fishermen that on an annual basis would be fishing if it was open for common property. Correct. That's correct.
And who are they?
The seiners.
Is there any dip netters or anybody that?
Mr. Chairman, there's recreational fisheries that target sockeye salmon produced by the hatchery, as Matt pointed out, in Resurrection Bay. There's also a sport and personal use dip net fishery targets sockeye salmon returning to the Leisure Lake stocking site in the Southern District. Also a sport fishery in saltwater targeting the sockeyes that return to Tutka Bay Lagoon Hatchery, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and this is where the difference, I think, comes in. If we don't let the sunset go away and keep it the way it is, you guys can control those uses also every year. Is that?
Mr. Chairman, when we go through the RPT and deal with an annual management plan, we're speaking or looking at the commercial fisheries. So I can't remember a time where, to get cost recovery, we made a management decision on a non-commercial group. And Lee can correct me if he remembers one in Lower Cook, but I don't recall that occurring.
But you could.
Is it within the extent of our? It's possible, but typically those harvests are small enough that they're going to be hard to measure the difference in many cases.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Johnstone?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I understand it, when Chairman Webster asked if they were going to get 100%, that's probably likely under the present circumstances. That's not always a guarantee. Am I correct on that? That's something that's subject to the negotiations that take place between the department and the association.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Okay. And under present circumstances, given their needs, when you answered yes to Mr. Webster's question, it's because of what you anticipate will occur because of the current circumstances.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Okay. And this will occur only if the board sunsets the Trail Lake. If the board were to sunset it and then reinstate the Bear Lake plan, or to create its own management plan, then the board would be the regulatory authority managing this, and it would be managed by the department under the authority given to it by the board. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that would be my understanding.
And I'd like to note that these fish, in my opinion, are not, when found in the terminal harvest area after they return, they are not common property fish as the term is used in the Constitution. The board is not required by law to manage them. Common property fish, the board is required by law to manage those. We're required to establish regulations. And we must do that. We can't cede this authority. So we're not ceding our authority to the department with common property. We're ceding it because they're hatchery fish. They're not common property as the term is used. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other board members? Question's been called. Mr. Mitchell?
Mr. Chairman, a point of clarification, I think, for the benefit of the board as well as the audience and those who might read the transcript, is that the legislature has delineated the respective authorities of the department and the board in AS 1610, essentially for 440 through 470 or thereabouts. And there, Mr. Johnston is correct that there is some overlapping authority, but to some extent there is independent authority in the department with respect to the management of the hatcheries. So there may be some instances where it wouldn't be a case of the board necessarily ceding its authority, but the department acting within its separate statutory authority. And there is, we've put in the record, it's RC 26, Attorney General's opinion from 1997, which goes into some detail discussing the respective authorities between the department and the board, which may be useful background for the board or anybody else concerned about this. That's RC 39, excuse me. So that may be useful to those wishing to understand both the current allocation authority and kind of history as to how we got this allocation of authority.
Thank you. Did I hear cause? Mr. Morris?
Mr. Chairman, I believe should this proposal be adopted, there will be no additional cost for any private person to participate. I would ask Mr. Marcotte to explain before we take the vote just what a yes vote and a no vote means.
Mr. Marcotte?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Morris, because the proposal is to delete the sunset provision, essentially the proposal is to continue the current Trail Lakes Hatchery Sockeye Salmon Management Plan. So a yes vote would continue the plan. A no vote, the plan would no longer apply after May 1st, 2011.
Question? Question's been called. Errors or omissions, Captain Kane?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mitchell?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Hartman?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Roll call vote, please.
Proposal 12, Morris,
No.
Gluberton,
No.
Webster,
Yes.
Brown,
No.
Jensen,
Yes.
Smith,
No.
Johnstone.
No.
The motion fails. 2 in favor, 5 opposed, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.